For those of you that watch Sam Roberts now, I told you that on Saturday, I wanted to see greatness. I wanted to see great people do great things greatly. And I saw that when John Jones returned to the UFC and in a minute and a half reminded the whole world why he's considered the greatest of all time. But about an hour and a half before John Jones did that in 90 seconds, somebody else returned to doing what they do better than just about anybody else. Because to me, as of Saturday, as of Selective Outrage, Chris Rock is back. Selective Outrage was Chris Rock's first comedy special in 4 years, in 20, or maybe even 5 years. In 2018, I want to say, Chris Rock showed up on Netflix with Tambourine. It was his first comedy special in 10 years. And it was a very different Chris Rock. I mean, Chris Rock had some of the most iconic, important comedy specials of his era. I'm talking about Bigger and Blacker. I'm talking about that whole, I think he had like a trifecta of specials that he had where he was untouchable. And then he started slowing down how often he was doing stand-up specials. Started making movies. I was in one of them. But he came back, and in 2018, he did Tambourine. And it was a different Chris Rock than we were used to seeing. It was a little bit more subdued Chris Rock. It was a little bit more introspective Chris Rock. And it was a Chris Rock that was less in attack mode. That, to me, is what Chris Rock has always been about, being in attack mode. He would go up on stage like a professional athlete and go with one mission, and that was to destroy. And I feel like that's what he did with Selective Outrage. He brought back the old Chris Rock. Will Smith did something to Chris Rock. Will Smith awakened this competitive beast when he slapped a taste out of his mouth at the Oscars a year ago, and he gave us, and look, this isn't the way I wanted it to go. I didn't want Chris Rock to have to suffer through that humiliation to get the result that we got, but we got the result that we got, and I can't say I'm not happy about it. Chris Rock goes up on stage for Selective Outrage, and it was live. It was the first time Netflix has done a live anything. It wasn't the first live comedy special. HBO used to do them, but they're rare these days that you actually do these stand-up specials live, and usually most stand-up specials are like 2, 3, 4 shows sometimes, packed together, sweetened up, to make the best possible viewing experience. But Chris Rock just took a mic, went on stage, and we'll do it live, pal. Fuck it. And Netflix pulled it off, man. It was a risky thing to make this high profile of an event, because it wasn't just a comedy special, right? It was, number one, Chris Rock's first comedy special in years, but number two, and more importantly, Chris Rock finally saying something very publicly about what happened between him and Will Smith at the Oscars. And Netflix said, yeah, this is going to be our first live show. So if they didn't have the technology all together, the whole world would have found out. Netflix as a company would have been in a lot of trouble, but they had all the technology together. The only snafu, if you want to call it that, would be Chris Rock's joke at the very end while he was doing his Will Smith bit. One of the jokes, he kind of put the carriage before the horse and screwed up his concussion joke. But he acknowledged it. He fixed it. He moved on. He recovered. He's a professional, man. And I'm sure it was driving him crazy on the inside, but you couldn't tell. And if anything, the joke still landed. And I thought it added to the credibility of the fact that the show was live. I've also seen like some people saying the jokes didn't land, which is crazy. Like, if you didn't like the jokes, that's okay. But to say that they didn't land, like you could hear the sounds. There's an audience full of people reacting in real time to the things that Chris is saying. You can't say that any of those jokes didn't land. You know, I think that it was interesting what Chris did. He turned some people off in the beginning by doing his bits about wokeness and stuff like that, because I think, you know, some people were like, yeah, and other people were like, okay, we've heard this before from every single comedian. To me, I don't get so kind of hung up on the topics, what the comedian is joking about. I get hung up on what the joke is. Is the joke funny? You could hit any topic. Is the joke funny? And to me, I was like, number one, it was funny. And number two, it's Chris Rock. If 5 minutes into the special, you're already being critical, let greatness be great. And I'm glad that I did. Because all the people that were like, he's washed, he's doing the whole cancel culture thing, they were all back on board. He got them all back and made the people that were like, yeah, cancel culture, I'm glad somebody's talking about it. When he started joking about when did white men become the victims, nobody's taking your country, he hit that too, right after it. And all of a sudden, all these people that had judged the whole thing because of their viewpoints on the topic were like, oh, wait, maybe it's okay. You got to let funny people be funny, and Chris Rock is funny. I think my favorite joke of the night was Chris Rock talking about his ex-wife. When he said his ex-wife is the smartest woman that she knows because she's got just as much money as he does, but she's not funny at all. Look, I mean, the fact that he hit cancel culture, he hit abortion, he hit race relations, he got into his personal life, marriage, children, he hit all of it. But it wasn't about the issue. It wasn't about who's right and who's wrong. It wasn't about what side you're on. It was about funny. It was about the joke. And there are a lot of people that are supporting Chris Rock today by saying, like, you know, he was right about Meghan Markle. It doesn't matter if he was right about Meghan Markle. Was he funny about Meghan Markle? And the answer is yes. When he was attacking the royal family, it was hilarious. Not because it was true or false, but just because it was hilarious. Of course, part of the show that everybody's talking about and should be talking about is the close, is the response, I guess, to Will Smith smacking him across the face as he was presenting the Best Documentary Award at the Oscars. And look, the fact that Chris Rock not only got smacked in the face by the biggest movie star in the world, the guy who would later accept Best Actor, that wasn't the worst part. Well, maybe it was the worst part. You'd have to ask him, right? But he got smacked in the face by this guy. Will got to go sit back down. Chris had to stand on that stage alone and just continue on with what he was supposed to be doing. Nobody came to his aid. Nobody stood up there with nobody. Will sat right back down in his seat. Nobody did anything. And then he had to go off stage and let the show continue as Will Smith later in the same night got a standing ovation, got to give a speech. You kidding me? You let a guy who just assaulted a presenter give a speech at the same award show after he did it? You gave him a trophy after he assaulted a presenter? Chris Rock has to just sit there and take it. I mean, it's humiliating to the highest level. And I thought that maybe Chris would come out and take the high road and kind of be jokey about it and go, we all make mistakes. He did not. He did not. Chris Rock chose violence. And the beauty of this is that in order to do a special like this, you have to practice a lot, right? You go and you do this material over and over and over again. So it's not like Chris Rock just woke up on Saturday morning and decided to unload on Will Smith and Jada Pinkett. Chris Rock decided months ago this is what he wanted to do and has spent the last several months perfecting exactly how he wants to dissect these people. And I'm so glad that he did. I like it when people in the right moments choose pettiness. And that's what Chris did. Was Chris petty? Yup. He was Tom Petty of the Heartbreakers, but he should have been. He was humiliated. Why should the guy who got smacked in the face be the one who takes the high road? No. Here's the beauty of the world that we live in. Will Smith's a big guy. Will Smith is a famous guy. Will Smith pretty much proved that in a moment he can do whatever he wants, and he did it to Chris Rock. But what makes Chris Rock, what's he better at than Will Smith? He ain't bigger than Will Smith. He's not going to knock him out in a fight. But if you get on stage You give Chris Rock a microphone and you put him in the right headspace, Chris Rock is as dangerous as anybody has ever been. And that's what Chris did. He said, okay, well, you want to do what you do? Why don't you now let me respond? Because I'm not going to hit you back. That'd be ridiculous. I'm going to go back at you the way I perform, the way I go back, the way I compete. And that's what he did. I mean, the emphasis that he put on the fact that the whole world was calling Will Smith a bitch. He didn't actually say Will Smith is a bitch. He just pointed out that everybody else did, and he did it over and over and over again. He brought up the red table talks. He brought up everything. I thought, naive me, I thought it was going to be one of those things where Chris just kind of hints at it. Oh, we all know what happened, but it brings him to a punchline, and then we close the show, and everything's nicey nice. No, we went through step by step. We went through what it was really about. We went through Jada Pinkett and Will Smith having a red table talk about the fact that there was sexual activity on Jada's part outside of the marriage. We talked about what that did to Will. Why would you do it publicly? All of it. The fact, I loved, Chris wouldn't even accept, there was that one narrative. Well, you got to understand, Chris has been going after Jada for a while. There's a history of this. No. Chris read it. Because Chris could have been, I'm so above all this, I didn't even read all those critiques. I didn't even know people were saying that. Oh, he knew exactly what people were saying. Chris has followed every word of this. And he went on stage last night to let you know. Oh, I've been following every word. And here's the truth, because he broke that narrative as well. No. And not only did he break the narrative, but when he was breaking the narrative, that's when he screwed up the joke, and he decided to go back and redo the joke because this isn't going to get missed. He's like Rambo. Will and Jada, they drew first blood every single time. And all Chris Rock did was tell some jokes. And that's what he did on Netflix. Better than anybody, man. I thought it was great, I like I said, it's not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's not about truth to power. It's not about any of that. I didn't even necessarily agree, the whole kind of narrative of the size differential, right? Will Smith wouldn't have hit Chris if Chris were the same size as Will. Probably true. But, as a guy who's smaller than most people, I recognize that I might get hit sometimes. It's going to happen, right? But Chris is not a victim of that because Chris is far more powerful with a microphone. Chris is far more powerful than Will with a microphone than Will is of Chris when it comes to brute strength. Oh, I love when they said, did it hurt? And Chris said, yeah, I've had summertime is still ringing in my ears. I thought it was good, man. I thought it was really, really good. And I thought it was pure. I thought it was pure comedy. It wasn't a famous person talking about another famous person. It wasn't like let's let bygones be bygones and solve this problem. It was one of the greatest comedians that we've ever gotten to see going up there and doing pure stand-up for the sake of stand-up. No ulterior motive. No, this is going to lead to something else. Like when you do the Super Bowl halftime and you're really only doing it to promote this show, or you're doing that show to promote this. Like, what are the ulterior motives? This was stand-up for the sake of stand-up. And that's the way it should be done. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I will say that Chris Rock is back. I hope that he does not lose this energy. Angry Chris Rock is the best Chris Rock. And you can like what he's angry about, or you can not like what he's angry about. If you today agree with Chris Rock or disagree with Chris Rock, I think you're missing the point. Chris Rock just showed the world why he's one of the funniest people to ever do stand-up. I think throughout that special, you didn't know what angle he was going to take. Ultimately, I loved that he started with the anti-woke stuff. Because then when he came back with the pro-life this and the white men being victimized that, you didn't know which angle he was going to take. He didn't fit into that box that people carved out for him immediately. Why? Because he went for the joke. not the talking point, not the politics of it, the joke. And you gotta love when a comedian goes for the joke. Chris Rock is back. Will and Jada honestly look worse than ever. I mean, if they thought maybe they were going to recover, it's going to now take another year before they recover because everybody's going to be quoting this. The same way people quote Chris Rock specials from 20 years ago. People still quote Chris Rock specials. People will be quoting this one. And Will Smith, the same way, and this is why all's fair. This is why what goes around comes around. The same way that Chris Rock could have been haunted by the fact that he was slapped by one of the most famous actors in the world at that award show for the rest of his life. Now, that actor is going to be haunted by one of the great Chris Rock bits ever. What did you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Some people didn't like it at all. Hit me in the comments. Let me know. I'll talk to you soon.